Welcome to this episode of Locked In. In this episode, I'm going to do my full review of the Gravel King Slick Plus Style tires. So if you've been looking at the Gravel Kings and you're not sure if you should go with the puncture resistant version or the standard casing, this video is for you, and please stay tuned and subscribe if you haven't already. So in this video, I'm going over the specs and features of this tire, price, ride quality, and is it worth it? So let's bust into the specs and features of this tire. Now this tire comes in a myriad of sizes, all in 700. They're going to range between a 28C all the way up to a 38C, and the 32, 35, and 38 are all tubeless compatible. They do come in a black or a tan wall color. Now I did ride the 35C and the 38C tires, and weight-wise that is 350 grams and 360 grams for the 38C, which is typically for these tires about a 20 to 40 gram weight penalty over the standard non-puncture resistant casings. Now with the Plus version, that is going to add in to your tire puncture resistance, as well as it is going to aid in wear, meaning that the tire is going to last you a little bit longer. You're going to get a few more miles out of it than the standard casing that Panaracer offers. Now as far as price goes, these are currently, for the Plus versions, listed at $59.99 on Panaracer's website, and I will have an affiliate link in the links below, so if you want to pick up some for yourself, I really would appreciate it if you use my link. It does really help out the channel. So as far as ride quality goes, I'll give you a little backstory. I've already done a review for just this standard Slick, and I'll link that in the description below, so you can see my thoughts on that tire compared to this one, and I rode those in a 32C size. Now, my first pair that I did test out that I put about 850 miles on was the 700C by 35 tan walls that I rode on my bike for all of my training for my big 550 mile San Francisco to LA trip. Now, I did initially notice a ride quality difference. Was it super drastic? Not necessarily, but that's because I went from a supple 32 to a stiffer 35. The casing for these tires, because they are more puncture resistant, are stiffer, so they're going to ride a little bit more firm, meaning you're probably going to want to drop a little bit more PSI than you normally would if you want that supple feel back. So a Plus 35 felt basically like the 32 at similar PSIs, because again, the ride quality difference in the casing does affect how you feel and how the tire feels on the road. So keep that in mind. You definitely want to use a pressure gauge and kind of make notes as you use any of Panaracer's Plus tires, because the casing feels a lot firmer to hand than it actually does read on the gauge. So you make sure you don't want to obviously go too low. But I was still happy with how these tires roll. I think they roll really fast. They still grip decent when you need to put them on gravel, but I have been really happy with them. As far as the San Francisco to LA trip, I did actually ride the 700 by 38C tires. I reached out to Panaracer and they did provide me both these tires, but I'm by no means paid by them. They sent me a fresh new set, since I did say like, hey, the 35 still have great amount of life left in them. I just would like a little bit more volume and just peace of mind running a new tire when doing a big long bike tour like that. And honestly, you can see here what the life is still left in for both these tires. Now keep this in mind, and this is really crucial. For the tan walls that you're looking at right now, this is about 800 to 900 miles. I'm about 185 pounds. My bike, let's say, is 20 pounds, but I'd say about 80% of those miles on this tire were completely loaded. My bike was weighing in about 35 to 45 pounds, depending on how it was loaded, because I was training for this trip with full weight on these tires. So this is gonna obviously wear them down even more. So the fact that they look this good after that many miles, I think these are easily gonna do over double that and still have some life in them. Now, will I rotate them? Probably at this point when I put them back on, but still really happy with the tread life. Now let's look at the black tires that I have. These have about 550 miles on them. Again, fully loaded, and these are going to be loaded at the closer to the 40 plus pound range the entire time. And I did have some gravel on this bike touring trip. And again, you can see the life in them and even the cut that I did have on this trip on day 2, where this big metal looking key punctured through the tire. And I dyna plugged it, and it held for another roughly about 350 or so miles that were left on the trip. So that's going to lead me to my last section of, is it worth it for these puncture resistant tires? I did have a puncture on these tires. Is it still worth it? Would I buy them again? Absolutely yes, for the right circumstances. Now for the 35s, again, I had 850 miles, no issues, no cuts. If it did leak, I didn't even notice it. I never noticed any spray of sealant on my bike, and they were trouble-free miles. Now on this trip with the 38s, when I did get the puncture, I was riding on the freeway. I was riding on the 101, and that is notorious for having crazy amount of garbage on the side, and I'm happy that I had these tires on me, and again, was trouble-free for the entire trip after that dyna plug. So I still think it is worth it. Now the ride quality, if you're looking for the absolute best ride and lowest weight option, I would go with the standard casing. If you're riding on road, or this is your all-road or road bike and you're predominantly just riding it on pavement, I would definitely save the little bit of weight and increase the ride comfort with that tire. If you're going to make a difference of choice between a puncture-resistant one, if your frame does clear maybe the next size up and you wanted to buy a 35, I would get a 38 to compensate for the ride quality difference initially, but you don't necessarily have to. Again, I've tested so many tires, I'm pretty tuned in to how my bike feels and can really notice those subtleties when swapping tires as far as size and casing differences, but that really depends on how tuned in you are to your bike setup. So I definitely would recommend these if you're looking for a more puncture resistant of the classic Gravel King Slick. And again, you can find those links in the description below to pick some up for yourself. Lastly, if you have any comments about this or want to give me your stories about the worst flat that you've had on your bike, put them in the comments below. And if you want to check out my San Francisco to LA trip, that video is completely done and I'll put a playlist in it so you can see what my bike setup was like and what it was like to do for the first time. I'm by no means a pro at this. Lastly, if you want to follow me on Facebook and Instagram or support the channel via my Spreadshirt or Patreon, links for everything else are in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching another episode of Locked In.
Let's get locked in today, like tutorials and quick and fix tips. Let's get locked in.